Hi everyone, I am Dr. Sarita Narayan, Professor and Head of Department of Periodontology, Rajiv Gandhi College of Dental Sciences and Hospital. So today we are going to discuss endoperioral lesions. So we are essentially going to talk about what are endoperioral lesions by definitions, the pathways through which endoperioral lesions spread, which are mainly three pathways: anatomical pathways, pathological pathways, and iatrogenic pathways, as in pathways that are created by clinicians themselves. We are going to understand the etiopathogenesis of this disease. How are we going to diagnose these diseases by means of clinical as well as radiographic examinations, and some other in the operatory tests. We are going to learn how to prognose these situations and finally treat them. So as usual, if you have any doubts, anything, you're welcome to speak to me in the department at any given point of time during college hours. Okay. So we'll start with the discussion by, as usual, first understanding and getting a slight refresh of the anatomy that we are going to be discussing in the rest of the presentation. Okay. So which area are we looking at? This entire anatomy of the pulp tissue as well as the supporting tissues around it is viewed as one biological unit for all discussions in the rest of the presentation. So we are mainly focusing on this area where the pulp and the periodontal ligament connects, and again this area where the two connect. So what is the definition? A non-vital tooth that shows destruction of the periodontal attachment reaching the entire way till the root apex, or a lateral canal for which both root canal treatment and periodontal therapy may be required are known as endoperioral lesions. So the keywords here are root apex, lateral canal, and destruction of the periodontal attachment. So what are the pathways of transmission, right? So the pathways of transmissions are apical foramen, where the nerves and the blood vessels enter into the pulp chamber, and it communicates with the periodontal ligament, accessory and lateral canals. Now these are extra canals basically, which are branching out of the main root canal. And as you know, these are most often found in furcation areas and in the apical third of the root. So you need to, if your periodontal pocket extends to the apical third, which means deep periodontal pockets, or you have a furcation involvement, then those are the areas that you are looking for endoperioral lesions. Just a small clinical tip. Congenital absence of cementum, exposed dental tubules, and developmental grooves. So now what this does is it exposes the dentinal tubules to the periodontal ligament. And if there is any infection in the periodontal ligament, it can more easily gain entry to the pulp and vice versa. In developmental grooves again, the bottom of the groove exposes the dentinal tubules in that area to the periodontal ligament space. So just a visual depiction of the same. So you all are familiar with this, the root canals, the apical foramen, and you can see lateral canals in the apical third, mainly in the apical third, and you also see them in the furcation area. Okay, so in this picture you can see it more clearly, the lateral canals in the apical third and the furcation canals which are seen in the furcation area. So you can clearly see there's decay. If the pulp gets involved, the infection can spread through these into the periodontal ligament and cause also an impression of furcation involvement, and it can spread from these into the periapical periodontal ligament, again causing an impression of a periodontitis. This is again pictures of exposure of dentinal tubules, which which can happen due to a lack of cementum. Lack of cementum can be also an iatrogenic problem due to excessive root planing, which removes the cementum. This is to show you developmental grooves, how they form concavities on root surfaces and thus exposing the dentinal tubules to the periodontal environment. The pathways of pathological origin. So if you have a root fracture, for example, patient has had a fall or has had a crash and there's a fracture of the root. So now this again becomes a pathway that is communicating from the pulp to the periodontal ligament. If there is idiopathic resorption, either internal or external, these are again become pathways of communication to the internal and the external environment. This is a case of loss of cementum due to. What are the pathways of iatrogenic origin? The pathways that we create as clinicians. Exposure of dentinal tubules, like I already mentioned, due to following root planing. So be very careful when you're doing root planing for your patients. Accidental root perforations during endodontic procedures. As you can see here, the post has come out of the root into the periodontal ligament, and root fractures during endodontic procedures. So now here what you need to be careful about is this sort of a situation, you will not know it clinically. So it's imperative to take an X-ray on completion of root canal treatment. And in today's time, I would say a three-dimensional X-ray, because your IOP is really showing you only two dimensions. So if your instruments are sticking out in the third dimension, you will not be able to see it on IOPA. So it's better to take a CBCT image to make sure that you have not perforated. So if your pulp is vital, then it is extremely resistant to microbial infection. And just like a healthy periodontal ligament, it is very difficult to infect a healthy pulp. However, once the pulp becomes necrotic, then it is very easily invaded and colonized by bacteria. So, for example, when the patient has a trauma, the tooth is pushed into the socket, or sometimes even during orthodontic intrusions, right? When you're trying to intrude the tooth in the socket and the force is not controlled, the tooth is pushed too far in, and what happens is the blood vessels and the nerves that are entering from the apical foramen get cut. And once that happens, there is no blood supply or nerve supply to the pulp, and you have what is known as pulp necrosis. So now this necrotic pulp, if it is invaded by bacteria through any of the pathways that we discussed, gets infected much faster than a healthy pulp. And then these inflammatory byproducts start releasing through these same pathways and trigger a response in the periodontal ligament. So what will you, if you have to enlist the etiologic and contributing factors, it would be poor endodontic treatment, coronal leakage, trauma, resorption, perforations, developmental malformations, and cracked tooth syndrome. So let's see some of the pictures. So the first example is poor endodontic treatment. So you can see in the distal canal, the endodontic restoration has not gone till the apex. This is an example of a poor endodontic treatment. This is an interesting example of leakage. Now, you all, as final year graduates, need to be able to identify this in your practices. So you can see there's a gap here between the margin of the crown and the root, and there is a little small black triangle there, right? So here basically the marginal fit of this restoration is not perfect, and it's leaving a small dead space over there. And this leakage is not only going to cause a periodontal inflammation here, but it is also going to seep into the sterile chamber that has been treated with root canal treatment and made completely asterile. Has been made completely sterile with the treatment. So now you're allowing bacteria to enter into the space and cause a reinfection. So this can be a cause of endoperio problems, causing a periodontal problem and a endodontic problem of a treated tooth. Tooth resorption, it may be internal or external, and again can cause periodontal problems. Root canal perforations. We've already seen this example in the older slide. Okay, so the etiologic factors can then be listed into living pathogens and non-living causes. So the living pathogens are always bacteria, fungi, viruses. You need to put down some names in your answers. Non-living are a list of the same things again. Extrinsic and intrinsic agents. So we've already discussed the intrinsic agents. The extrinsic agents are foreign bodies, amalgam, absorbent paper strips, gingival retraction cords. All these things can cause. So in both endodontic and periodontal diseases, the cause of the pathology is infectious, as in microorganisms, but the locations are different. In periodontal disease, they are found on the root surface, and in case of pulpal diseases, they are found within the root canal system. The names of the bacteria that you need to remember are P. intermedia, spirochetes, and black pigmented bacteria. Fungi, mainly recovered fungi, are Candida albicans. Seen are the herpes simplex family. So HSV, cytomegalovirus, and Epstein-Barr viruses. So let's start with understanding how to classify these diseases so that our prognosis and treatment becomes more simple. So first is a primary endodontic disease, second is a primary periodontal disease, third is a combined disease, that is a primary endodontic disease with a secondary periodontal involvement. Fourth is a primary periodontal disease with secondary endodontic involvement. And fifth is true combined diseases. So when I was a student like you, my question was, why would you classify a primary endodontic disease and a primary periodontal disease under endoperiolesions, right? Let's look at what happens in these situations in the next slide and what is the reason why they need to be classified under endoperiolesions. Okay, so the first image that you see, right, is of a primary endodontic lesion. So a primary endodontic lesion, which can be a potential endoperio lesion, which means that this endodontic lesion can spread either through the furcation canals or through the lateral canals into the periodontal ligament and cause an endoperio problem. So when you see the patient, you don't see clear signs of an endodontic involvement and a periodontal involvement, clinical signs, but you see a potential for this to cause an endoperio problem in the future. So then this patient is in your radar, and initially you're just going to do endodontic treatment, but you're going to watch this patient for the next 6 months to see if any periodontal problems develop. Okay? Now the second situation is a primary periodontal lesion. Now again, if you have a primary periodontal lesion where you have pockets which are extending into the apical third, or you have pockets that are extending into the furcation area, you know that this is a potential site which can have endoperio lesion. But when you're seeing the patient clinically at that given point of time, you are not able to see any signs of endodontic involvement. So you are once again going to put this potential patient on a radar to rule out an endodontic infection in the next 6 months. But in terms of treatment, you are only going to treat the periodontal lesion at that given point of time. Okay. So I hope you understand the rationale behind including these two situations in endoperio lesions. So if you had a pocket which was like not extending till the apical third or not involving the furcation area, then it's just a periodontal problem. It doesn't get classified under endoperio. Okay, then the third situation that you see is a primary endodontic lesion involving the periodontia. Okay, now here, so the difference between these pictures is that you can see this ragged line, right? That means the periodontal destruction has happened in this situation. So you have an endodontic infection due to various causes, iatrogenic, deep caries involving the pulp, trauma, etc. You have an endodontic lesion, it has involved the periodontal ligament, and you are seeing signs of a pulpal involvement as well as involvement of the periodontal ligament at that given point of time. You're seeing very clearly that the periodontal ligament is also involved in terms of changes in the periodontal anatomy, and you're seeing you have clear-cut signs that the pulp is also involved. So this, and you also have a very clear sign showing you that the pulp has probably got involved first, because there may be a presence of caries or all the possible causes of a pulpal involvement. Okay, so this would then be classified as a primary endo and a secondary perio lesion. The fourth example that you see is of a primary perio and a secondary endo lesion. Now, I have included this picture just for lack of finding a better picture. I would have liked this pocket to be in the apical third, right? So, yeah, so here again, you clearly see that a pocket is present, right? And they have drawn an accessory canal here to show you that the pocket has involved the accessory canal, and this has involved the pulp, and thus it has also caused a periapical lesion. So once again, you're looking at a tooth where there's a clear periodontal infection and there are no signs of a cause of the pulpal infection. That means there is no caries, there is no fracture, there is nothing to explain the pulpal infection. So the only thing that is explaining the pulpal infection is the primary periodontal lesion, which has involved the pulp and caused a pulpal infection. So this then gets classified as a primary perio and a secondary endodontic lesion. And then you have the last category, which is the easiest to diagnose, which is true endoperio lesions. So where you will see a clear sign explaining why there is an endodontic involvement, once again, like a fracture or a history of trauma or a deep caries, and you will have a periodontal pocket, which is explaining the etiology of the periodontal lesion, and both have extended to unite and now have become a true combined endoperio lesion. So what this tells you is you have to address the primary etiology of both these conditions. So you have to treat the pulp by treating the cause of the pulpitis, and you have to treat the periodontal ligament for treating the cause of the periodontitis. So I hope that's clear. We'll move on to the next slide. What are the different ways in which you can diagnose these? So most of the things you all already know, like for a periodontitis situation, you have several clinical signs and symptoms which we've discussed in our earlier chapters on periodontal pocket as well as chronic periodontitis. And then you have various signs of for diagnosing you must have learned in endo. So we will just talk about things that are involving perio and endo situations. So clinical examinations, that is visual examination. Now the visual examination is looking for a sinus or a swelling. Palpation, again it is looking for tenderness on palpation. Percussion is looking for tenderness on either apical or vertical percussion or lateral percussion. So usually pain due to lateral percussion is pointing towards a periodontal cause, and vertical percussion is pointing towards a endodontic cause. The nature of pain. Now this is again I have spoken about several times in my lectures, where a pulpal pain is an acute pain. Patient comes to your clinic holding his jaw, says, "Doc, I haven't slept the whole night. I've had painkillers, but I've not been able to sleep." So even before the patient sits in your chair and opens his mouth, you know that it's a pulpal problem. Periodontal pain usually is not existent at all, and if it is, then it is a dull and radiating pain. Mobility seen generally if there is severe bone loss, vertical bone loss due to periodontitis, vertical or horizontal bone loss due to periodontitis, or there's a large periapical lesion which is causing a sort of an intrasocket vertical mobility. Tooth elongation, pulp vitality tests. Right? So these are done to check the vitality of the pulp, So when you say vitality, it means that the pulp has vital blood supply and nerve supply. So that is what is indicating that the pulp is vital. Okay. So these are either done by electric testing or they are done by thermal testing by using this sprays, ethyl oxide sprays, or heated burnishing points or hot gutta percha. I think the I would leave this to the conservative department. They are the experts at this. So I'm sure you'll learn it in your lectures there. Pocket probing, of course, by using your Williams probe, etc. Fistula tracking. Now, fistula tracking, we have discussed this again when we have spoken about complex pockets in perio in the chapter on periodontal pocket, where I have mentioned to you all about how you can use a gutta percha point to track a complex pocket. So a similar thing is used to do fistula tracking, simply because a probe is very rigid and it can go only in one direction. It cannot bend around the tooth, whereas a fistula or a sinus has a very tortuous pathway. So you cannot use a rigid instrument to check a fistula. You need something that is firm, but also at the same time pliable. Crack tooth testing. Crack tooth basically means if the crown portion of the tooth or the root portion of the tooth has developed a crack due to a heavy occlusive load applied on it. And radiographic examinations. So we will go into the details of these examinations. So this is what an abscess or a sinus looks like in the first picture, and this is what your typical periodontitis with gingival signs of inflammation look like. Okay, so I've just divided it in according to the classification to help you understand better. So classification being primary endodontic, primary periodontal, primary endo, secondary perio, primary perio, secondary endo, and true combined. So how will you diagnose primary endo with a visual examination? There first of all may be a cause to explain the endodontic infection, decay, fractured respiration, etc. And there may be a presence of a sinus opening. So you can see here, now this sinus opening is present anatomically or morphologically in the attached gingiva, but it is caused by an endodontic lesion. There are no signs of periodontitis. It's a knife-edged, healthy gingiva. Primary periodontal lesion, you will see inflamed gingiva, you will see redness, typical signs of gingivitis, you will see plaque, calculus, and it will usually be multiple teeth that are involved. Primary endodontic with secondary periodontal, you may see plaque at the margin of the tract, and once again you will see a clear explanation for the endodontic involvement. You will clearly see a cause in the mouth as to why the pulp is involved. Primary perio, secondary endo, it will be around multiple teeth, presence of plaque and calculus, and there will be either a localized deep pocket or furcation involvement or recession or root exposure. True combined is easy, you will see signs of both. So palpation doesn't typically work to identify a primary endodontic lesion unless it has involved the periapical lesion and come out in the form of a sinus. All the other four you will have pain on palpation. Primary endodontic, always tender on percussion. So both your primary, all the three categories where the endo is involved will be tender on percussion, 100%. Primary perio with secondary endo, where the endo is definitely involved, again maybe tender on percussion. Primary perio lesions, sometimes may be tender on lateral percussion. We've already discussed this. Endodontic pain is always sharp in acute conditions, otherwise dull because the pulp is already necrotic, and there is no pressure because of a periapical abscess because it has already the pus has already oozed out either through the periodontal pocket or through a sinus. So mobility, if you have a primary endodontic lesion with fractured roots, yes, mobility is quite high. Primary perio, localized to or generalized to the teeth that are involved with the periodontal lesion. Primary endo with secondary perio, mobility only will be on that single tooth. Primary perio with secondary endo, generalized mobility. And true combined is very interesting because there will be generalized mobility due to the periodontitis, but there will be severe mobility related to the involved tooth. Pulp vitality testing. So like we said, you can either use electricity or you can use a cavity test or you can use a thermal test. So if you have a primary endodontic lesion, the response is usually lingering. If it is lingering, that means your patient is responding to the thermal input, but it is not a normal response. It is a lingering or an exaggerated response. So that shows that there is pulpitis, and pulpitis is usually irreversible 70% of the time. If there is no response, then your pulp is necrosed already. It's non-vital. Primary perio, the pulp is vital and response to test is normal. Primary endo, secondary perio, vitality tests are usually negative, or at least you get a lingering response. Primary perio, secondary endo, pulp vitality may be positive in multi-rooted teeth. So what this means is that if your pathway of inflammation is through the furcation, like a furcation involvement, which is involved the pulp. So sometimes only one root may be involved, and it is extremely difficult to make out with any kind of vitality test if only one root is giving either a lingering response or no response. So that's why most of the times you get these false positive and false negative results in case of multi-rooted teeth. True combined lesion, typically vitality tests are negative, but again you have a similar problem in multi-rooted teeth where sometimes one root is vital or two roots are vital and one root is non-vital. Situations. So in most situations when you're diagnosing endoperio lesions, I've seen that a lot of people rely completely on vitality tests. No, it has to be an overall overhaul of all the clinical signs and symptoms and even a history. Only then can you diagnose endoperio lesions. You cannot rely only on a vitality test. Now, pocket probing, primary endodontic lesion. So sometimes a primary endodontic lesion may have caused a periapical abscess, and this abscess may have caused a sinus, and like the first picture that you saw, and the sinus may be opening directly into the attached gingiva. Sometimes the sinus opens through the pocket. Okay, so when you probe through the pocket, you will get a deep pocket, but there will be no plaque and calculus in that area to explain the pocket. So the pocket is primarily caused by this pulpal infection escaping through the periodontal ligament space. I'll show you a picture of that later. Primary perio lesion, multiple wide pockets. Primary perio with secondary endo, again multiple wide pockets. Now primary endo with secondary perio. Okay. So once again, you may have a solitary pocket. And if the periodontal lesion is due to fracture, then you will have a solitary deep pocket. Okay. True combined, you will have both. You will have multiple pockets and you will have a deep pocket and abrupt drop at the area where the endo is also involved. This is a picture of that classical first category that I was talking to you about, which where or first or the third category, that is either a primary endo, first category only actually, where there's a primary endo lesion, but you have a probing depth because the primary endo lesion is oozing out through the periodontal ligament space. So you have a pocket, but there is nothing. You can see the neighboring teeth. There is no plaque, calculus, nothing. This is an absolutely healthy mouth, and the pocket is only in this mid-buccal area of this molar. So if you try to probe anywhere else around this tooth, you will find there is probably no bleeding on probing also. So there is clearly another explanation for this. And very correctly, once the endodontic treatment is done, the pocket has completely resolved. So this is a very important message for you to take back to your practices, right? The minute you see a pocket, don't jump to perio and call the periodontist to treat this pocket. Periodontist may treat the pocket, but as long as the endodontic lesion is not treated, the pocket will recur. Okay, so the only treatment for this is endodontic treatment. Sinus tracing, I already spoke to you about this using gutta percha, to which points to the apex or the furcation area in molars. Primary perio lesion, if you put a gutta percha point, will almost always end on the lateral aspect of the tooth. It will not go towards the furcation or towards the perioapical area. Primary endodontic, secondary perio, again it will go towards the apex of furcation. Same again. True combined lesions, it's usually difficult to trace out the origin of the lesion if a sinus tract is present, and very often you will see the origin of this lesion only once you open a flap. So I'm going to show you a picture of this also a little later. Just keep this in mind. Sinus tracing in true combined lesions. So this is the gutta percha point that we were talking about. So this gutta percha point has been, so though you see a lesion over here in the X-ray, there is nothing visible in this patient clinically, and you only are able to see a pocket. But when you place the gutta percha point, you can see the gutta percha point going straight up and turning around the tooth, right? So, and you can see that the level of bone is intact. So cracked tooth syndrome, like I told you, it is due to sudden application of excessive occlusal forces like primary trauma from occlusion, which sometimes results in the structure of the tooth itself cracking. And depending on how deep this crack is, if the crack is going till the pulp, then you will have signs as symptoms of pulpal involvement. So in a primary endodontic lesion, where the crack has involved the pulp, that the patient comes to you with pain, and the pain is especially on chewing, especially on releasing the biting pressure. So what is assumed is that when the patient bites, the two segments are driven apart, and when the patient releases the biting pressure, the two segments come together, and this is what causes the pain. Primary perio with secondary endo, no symptoms. Primary endo, similar, and true combined, similar again. Radiographs, primary endo, you will see clear signs of explanation of the endodontic lesion like deep caries, fractures, improper root canal treatments, etc. The entire list is here. Primary perio, you will see vertical bone loss, more generalized. Primary endo with secondary perio, again a reason for the pulpal involvement and some amount of bone loss of the periodontal ligament. Primary perio, secondary endo, and a bone loss with no sign of why the pulp is involved, and the bone loss will be pointing towards the furcation or the apical third where the lateral and the accessory canals are present. So now this is where you have to also keep in these two situations, you also have to keep your eyes open for uh, lack of cementum in that region, right? So either post root resorption, either internal or external, or root planing, excessive root planing where the cementum is removed, fractures, cracks, and even grooves, right? Because those are the potential areas where this pathways become active suddenly between the periodontal ligament and the endodontic environment, right? So just keep your eyes open for all these 4-5 points and rule them out when you're doing your clinical and radiographic examination. And true combined, it will clearly show you reasons for the endodontic involvement and bone loss, what is more generalized. Okay. So now that we have understood how to diagnose clinically and radiographically these lesions, let's understand the prognosis. So always, the in endoperio lesions, the prognosis always depends upon endo, I would say, right? Because if you can't do the endo, now here everywhere I have mentioned primary endo, it has a good prognosis, but that's if you can do the endodontic treatment, right? So if your canals are not calcified, if you're able to access the canals, if you're able to go till the tip of the root and have a proper hermetic seal. So basically in all these situations, that is 1, 3, 4 and 5, your endodontic prognosis has to be 100%, right? Only if that is 100%, then you look at the periodontal prognosis. So in primary perio lesions, it depends on that is number 2, that does not depend upon the endodontic prognosis, but it depends on the severity of the periodontal disease and the patient factors. So all the factors that you have learned about in periodontal prognosis matter here. Okay. Primary endo, secondary perio. If the endo prognosis is 100%, then you have to look at the severity of the periodontal disease. Same in situation 4 and situation 5. So then we'll go to the treatment plan. I've just made a flowchart for you to understand this easily, and again you have the treatment at one glance. So I've essentially divided it into a primary endo lesion, primary perio lesion, and combined lesions. Okay, so primary perio endo treatment, primary endo treatment, primary perio treatment. Okay, now in combined lesions, so again I have divided it into primary endo with secondary perio, and then primary perio with secondary endo and 2 combined. Okay, so let's look at primary endo with secondary perio. First treat endo and just do simple hygiene and your SRP and scaling and all that for the perio lesion. Evaluate for 2-3 months. If the perio lesion settles down, like in the X-ray that you saw of the molar, the pictures that you saw of that molar with a single deep pocket, if the perio settles down, there's no need to perform any periotherapy. If due to iatrogenic damage or fracture or perforation of the root, you have to manage the root fracture and you have to seal the perforation. And once again, the same thing. Do basic treatment for perio, evaluate for 2-3 months, and only if required, perform perio. Then we come to primary perio and secondary. So if it's primary perio, secondary endodontic lesion, and 2 combined. So here you have to treat the periodontal lesion and you also have to treat the endodontic lesion in both these situations because you are seeing clear signs of endodontic involvement, right? So your sequence is always endo treatment first. Like I told you, if your endo treatment itself is not possible, then there is no question of evaluating the periodontal prognosis. So first, endo should be possible and endo should be treated with a proper hermetic seal, and only then we look at the perio. So perio, basically prior to surgery, palliative periodontal therapy and root canal treatment needs to be done. That is your scaling and SRP. Reevaluate after 2 to 3 months. If there is a periapical resolution, then and if there is no mobility, then the periodontal treatment can be done depending upon the depth of the pocket. If there is mobility, splinting can be done. If there is no periapical resolution, right? Now, okay, now this situation, primary perio with secondary endo, right? So sometimes, I don't want to confuse you, so let's just clarify this. So here you are seeing there's a primary periodontal lesion with a pocket with whatever signs of perio, and probably when you're doing a vitality test, you're getting a response, right, of the pulp, maybe a lingering response. So sometimes what happens is there is pulpitis, but this may be reversible. It's not necessary that it is irreversible. So that is why you evaluate for 2 to 3 months. But on your vitality or on other tests that you're using to check the endodontic status, if it is confirmed that the pulp is involved with an irreversible pulpitis or the pulp is necrotic, then you have to do the root canal treatment. Okay, so there is just maybe 20% of the cases where you are seeing a clear sign of periodontitis you are seeing a positive response on the vitality test, but you're not sure whether this response is pointing to a reversible or a irreversible pulpitis, right? So you give it a month, sometimes even a week or 2 weeks, and the patient comes back to you saying, my pain is not relieved. And remember, endo pain will be sharp. Right? So if that sharp pain continues even after your palliative treatment, then you need to do a root canal 100%. Right? So now even after root canal treatment, now assuming that you've done the palliative perio and the root canal, evaluate after 2-3 months, and if there is no periapical resolution, then it's usually a hopeless prognosis and extraction. Or sometimes if it's a multi-rooted tooth and the periapical lesion is only on one root, then you can either do a resection or bicuspirization or a hemisection, right? And then of course follow up is the golden mantra in dentistry, in any medicine for that matter, for any condition. To revise today just with some clinical examples instead of just thinking of the theory once again. This is your first situation, primary endo in a mandibular molar with a necrotic pulp, probably due to a small exposure, because so sometimes what happens when you see something like this in an x-ray is the pulp horns are very high. Again, not my speciality. I would prefer conservative department explains this. Just to give you an associated tip, the pulp horns are sometimes very high and you don't see it in the x-ray. Or there is secondary decay below these restorations, or there is marginal leakage if the cementation has not been done properly, and this leakage goes into the pulp and involves the pulp and makes it necrotic. So many a times the patient is not even aware of this, right? This patient may have a deep pocket in the periodontal pocket, or sometimes many clinicians have seen, they see this bone loss in the radiograph in the furcation area, and sometimes there's no periapical lesion. Now here there's a periapical lesion, so it's kind of more indicative of an endodontic etiology, but sometimes there's no periapical lesion, there's only this bone loss in the furcation, and there is no explanation as to why the pulp is involved. So they call us and they say, hey, it's a furcation involvement, it's a perio problem, right? But once you do the vitality, you realize that it's an endo problem. Just root canal treatment has completely resolved the bone loss in the furcation as well as in the periapical lesion. So this is a type 1 endoperio lesion, primary endodontic disease. Primary endo with secondary perio. So this has started off as an endo lesion, but then also involved the periodontal ligament, and now here you have to treat the endodontic infection as well as the perio pocket. Perio secondary endo. So this has probably started off as a deep pocket. Now again, see the limitation of a two-dimensional X-ray. This pocket is on the buccal surface, but you are not able to see any bone loss here because this X-ray is only depicting a bone loss in a single dimension. It is not showing you the third dimension at all. So you are not able to evaluate the bone loss on the palatal or the buccal aspect. You can see a periapical lesion, and this requires both. So this periodontal pocket has caused irreversible pulpitis in this patient, and you have to do a periodontal treatment as well as an endodontic treatment. This is a true combined lesion. So I should have added a clinical picture with this, but you can see there are calculus particles stuck on the tooth. So there is a primary etiology that explains the periodontal bone loss. There is an etiology that explains the endodontic involvement. You can see that very clearly. That is either a secondary decay or a marginal leakage that has caused this. And thus you have a true endodontic involvement and a true periodontal lesion. Right? Now here your prognosis becomes very important. So if this tooth is, say, grade 3 mobile, or in this situation grade 2 mobile, right? Now here you have a horizontal bone loss. The roots are very slender. So very often it's not worth putting this patient through endo and through perio and not really be able to do anything about this bone loss, right? You're not really able to build this bone up. So if this patient, I mean, if this tooth is just grade 1 mobile, then yes, I would go ahead and do an endo and do a perio, because always our focus is to retain what is natural rather than replacing it with artificial, right? So if it's just a grade 1 mobile tooth, then I would go ahead and do both the treatments. But if it is grade 2 or more, I will definitely give the option to the patient of extraction with a replacement. And if it is grade 3, mobile, I would extract the tooth. So in the first two situations, the endodontic prognosis has to be good. The root canal has to be able to be done perfectly. Otherwise, it is not worth taking a chance. Again, a true combined lesion. You can see this is that classical pink tooth, what you call, because of necrosed pulp, and you also have bone loss. You also have again calculus deposits explaining why the bone loss has happened, and you can see several other signs here like tooth elongation, right? Slight um, open embrasures, etc. So it's a classic combined lesion. You can also see a small sinus here, so it's like a really good case for you to learn from. This is again improper endodontic treatment. Either the root canal filling is short, is what has caused it, or a canal has been missed. So you all know that there are sometimes 2 or 3 canals in the mesial roots and lower molars. So if you don't fill all the canals, then that one canal that is left can cause a situation like this. So again, a properly done retreatment, and there is complete resolution of the infection. Leakage, I have already shown you this. You can see the handling of this problem where a proper restoration has been done, and now there is complete resolution. Coming to the conclusion, a perioendo lesion can have different pathogenesis ranging from a simple infection to a relatively complex one. To make a proper diagnosis, a team effort is very important, right? And even to treat this patient, because just a periodontal treatment will not suffice. The clinician needs to perform restorative, endodontic and periodontal treatment, either singly or in combination. And therefore, to achieve the best outcome, a team approach is extremely important. Any further questions, clarifications, any clinical situations which you have a doubt about, you're welcome to come and see me. So what are the common questions asked? Usually only 5-mark questions, either on classification or clinical and radiographic features. Thank you for a patient hearing.